How you doing? Okay, so assuming that you can hear me and everything's working fine, I'm gonna start by modeling out what this is kind of gonna look like. So it's not like any old miner can just walk into a medical surgery or any medical institution and be like, "Yo, I'm suffering from gender dysphoria. I want to get affirmation surgery." So what it's gonna look like is that anyone between the age of maybe 15 to 18 who is experiencing gender dysphoria and has gone through the legal system and is able to undergo this process. And now, so the way that that'll work is in line with current laws, whereby if a parent is not the best actor or not the best possible person to decide what is in the best interest of the child, then they have to go through the family court system, and then it's the family court who decides whether or not it is within the best interest of the child to undergo this surgery. Now, the reason why it's particularly bad that we allow parents to have an influence in this, particularly with 15 to 18-year-olds, is that during this stage, currently, according to Dr. Eric Erickson, at this point in their development, they're kind of going through that existential crisis. They're starting to challenge who they are identity-wise. And so then when you combine that with Dr. James Marcia's four statuses of identity, at this point they're somewhat going through what's called an identity moratorium. Now, what that is where they actually have a crisis in terms of their identity, which is not necessarily bad. It's where they start to challenge who they are. It's where they start to think about who they could be. Now, on the flip, you've got people who go through identity diffusion, which means that they don't kind of give it much thought. And now if we allow parents to influence this and parents to say no without thinking about what the child actually wants to do, then the diffusion leads to what's called identity foreclosure, which means that they've kind of just decided who they are based on based on premature decisions and, not being able to actually, think about it. Whereas the opposite end, so generally they tend to not really give it much thought later in life because they've kind of just accepted who they are, as opposed to actually thinking about it and actually being able to go through these processes. And so, like I said, this whole thing, it's not like people are just going to walk into any old doctor surgery and be like that. They still have to prove that it's beneficial for them and worth it for them. It just means that, parents who, in this instance, aren't always the best possible people to decide what's best for their child, don't really get to say yay or nay, because at the end of the day, it is a child's own decision and it comes back down to what they want.
Okay. So it's Josh, isn't it? That's your name. Can you give us a thumbs up? Yeah. Can you hear me okay? You can hear me? Yeah. I thought my mic was out, but when you do it on this 20 minutes each thing, it looks like you can't actually do a mic test before you start. And anyway, that's fine. Okay. Right. You've qualified this a little bit because the title of your debate is somewhat, I mean, you look at it, we should allow minors to undergo gender affirmation surgery without parental consent. I mean, that's kind of a catch-all title. So, I'm kind of thinking, oh, what age is that then? Here in England, a minor is considered someone below the age of 18. I've checked it on Google today, and I understand that it's the same with Australia. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, you could give us a thumbs up, if you want. Okay. Okay. I mean, you've qualified it now by saying, sort of anyone over 15, 15 to 18. Well, okay, you can qualify it if you like. I mean, whatever, it doesn't make much difference to me. Parents have a responsibility to children. They're responsible for them up until the age of 18, financially, etc., everything, and with that responsibility also comes privileges of control, decision making. And I don't know whether I'm going to be able to talk about this for 20 minutes because, I don't know, I just flatly disagree. The idea that, if I think of like one of my kids, one of my boys, at the age of 16, telling me that he's had a, what do you call it? Gender affirmation? Is that the same as sex change? I take it? Yeah? Okay, back to you, I think.
Okay, so like I get that, parents have some form of responsibility and control, and like that's totally fine. But I think in this instance, their control is not not the best possible thing for the child, particularly because if we were to look at this in a modern context, right? So you've got children who generally tend to be from my generation. Then you also have people from the generation above that, where things like gender affirmation societies, transgender individuals, and things like that were not as widely accepted as they are now. And so the reason why why the parents shouldn't be able to have a say in this at the moment is because a lot of the time parents bring their own bias into this. And so it's not that parents think that it's good for the child or bad for the child. It's that the parents particularly don't agree with it. And so then, all of the harms that come from this are not mitigated. And so the reason why it's particularly important in this instance is because it is quite likely that this child is feeling this child who is going through dysphoria is feeling pretty shit about themselves, particularly because I can't say that I've been through this, but I would imagine it's quite hard when, you physically are one thing and then mentally identify as another. And the only way to do that is through something like this, but you've got your parents who don't quite understand what's going on or don't quite understand how you feel or the way that, it's impacting your life, shouldn't really have much of a say in this, particularly when they're bringing in their own bias and their own personal views into this. So I think if parents were to be somewhat objective about it and look at it outside of the way that, they look at it, then that's fine, but that doesn't exactly happen. And so it shouldn't come down to the parents deciding what's best for the child, particularly when it is the child who is going through this identity crisis, the child who is, challenging who they are and wants to be something different, not the parent. And, while I think that to some extent parents should have some control, I don't think they should have the final say, particularly when you also, to do this, you can't just walk into a clinic and say, I want to do it. You still have to go through a court system where the family law, the family courts decide what is best for the child. And, even if the child thinks it's great, if the family court decides no, they are the ones who have the final say. So you still get that control. It's not coming from a biased influence who might not necessarily understand what you're going through.
Okay, look, call me old-fashioned, call me boring, I don't care, okay? But I am going to be old-fashioned about this. It's very gracious of you to say that, the parents should have some control. Well, what? I mean, come on, and who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to pay for this? If I lived in a country where my child could be operated on without my say-so, I would take my boys and I would leave that country. Okay, that's it. End of story. It's mad. But there's other things to do. Again, I'm going to be old-fashioned. I'm not going to sort of say, join the Boy Scouts or something. But for goodness sake, how can you know what you want to do at that age? What you want to be? Once you're 18, whatever you want to do, get a job, pay for it yourself, fine. But I would not want to live in a country that A, does these things behind my back, and also, yeah, let's just home in on this one just for a second, Josh. Who pays for this? Can you answer that?
Whoever's paying for it is not relevant to this at all. So it's regardless of whether the parents, the student, the government, or anyone else is paying for it is just completely not relevant, because what we're arguing whether or not parents should have a say, not who's going to pay for it, because obviously it is ridiculously expensive, which I will concede that. But that doesn't mean that because it's expensive, parents should have a say in yes or no. And so while I get that, sometimes parents might have to pay for it, sometimes they might not, regardless of the fact whether it's practical or not, we're not arguing practicality. We're arguing as to whether parents should say yes or no, which is why the practicality argument, yes, I understand that. Like if that was relevant here, I would concede that to you, but it's not. So take it back.
Well, I beg to differ. Payment not relevant. It is actually relevant. And you say, whether what do you say? The government pays for it. The government haven't got any money. Yeah, the government is the people paying taxes. Okay, other people who are working, paying for something. It's not the government's money. It's our money. Wherever you live, it's the people's money. Okay, so it is relevant. And again, if I lived in a country, whose government did that sort of thing, I'd want to leave that country. Have you got a job, Josh, by the way, yourself? You have? Okay, but you I think we've talked before about something else, haven't we? But you haven't had any kids, have you? Do you think you'll feel, if you have kids yourself, is that something that you want to have yourself? Have you thought about this? And if so, do you think you'll feel the same or any different?
No, I think this shows the gap between generations here, because I personally would totally be supportive of my children if they were to do this, because I understand how hard it can be, should they identify as something different. But I just think that, it's not something that parents should have an influence in, considering that, when we look at the fact that parents being somewhat old-fashioned, and I don't mean that in a bad way, because that can be good. When it comes to older generations of people who kind of don't really agree with this sort of thing, that's what causes gaps, not only between the kids themselves and their parents, but it also just creates harmful problems with the children when, you've got someone who's telling them that they can't be who they want to be. And, this kind of leads to the fact that of all of the transgender and non-gender conforming youth, so under 18 people in America, almost half of them have at least attempted suicide. And that's not to say that, all of them have tried it for this very reason. But when you look at it, this could very well be a factor when you look at their parents who are saying, no, you can't do this. But not only that, but it also leads to the rest of their life feeling pretty negative, because what happens when, so going back to James Marcy's theory of the 4 statuses of identity, right? So if you don't act on something like an identity crisis, and I don't mean crisis as in like, holy shit, I don't know what I am. It's just, by that, I just mean they're questioning, right? If you don't do anything about that, they kind of just accept whoever people are telling them to be. And so it means that, they, for the rest of their life, don't really act on it, because they've already decided based on what everybody else says who they are, which then means that they feel pretty negative, not only about themselves, but just become pretty cynical towards society for the rest of their life, which is why I totally support this. Like, obviously, you have people who don't, but I don't think, I definitely think the parents should have some control over a situation like this, but I still don't think that they should have the final say. I think they should definitely have an influence, and they should definitely be able to, present something to the court system if that's what it comes to. But I don't think the parent should have the overriding yes or no as to whether or not the child is able to do this or not. But to not get caught up on money, I didn't mean to say that the government is going to pay for it. I just was throwing terms around loosely, because regardless of who pays for it, regardless of who does, right now we're not arguing practicality. We're arguing as to whether or not the parents should have a say, not as to whether or not who's going to pay for it and who's going to be able to afford it.
Well, I wish you'd make your mind up, because I'm pretty sure I heard you say the parents should have no influence. And then you seem to come back and say perhaps they should have, not even perhaps, you just said they should have some influence. So I don't know what it is really, what your position is on that. I don't like this, like, oh, it's a generational thing, it's all old fashioned. I mean, I'm the punk rock generation, don't give me that crap. It was blimey, I've seen everything, you're not going to shock me with things like that. This idea that you were saying about, like, oh, if a child doesn't make this decision, then for the rest of their lives they're going to be all happy and this, that, and the other. I mean, that's nonsense. Kids have hang-ups over lots of things. When they get a bit older, they think, oh, what was all that about? Really, oh, I'm okay now. I mean, crikey, just you've got, get to 18, and then decide what you want to do. You might have a complete different feeling about it. Yeah, I don't know what else to add to that, really. Can I ask how old you are?
I'm currently 20 years old, if that means anything.
Yeah, you're 20 years old, if that means anything. Yeah, it means, you're fairly young, but you're over 18. And if you want to have whatever, I mean, I don't know, your own person. Again, I do sort of come down to the practicalities of it all. If for instance you wanted to have that done yourself, I would expect you to pay for it. Sorry, but there you are. It's just wrong, that's it. Sorry.
There's no need to apologize. Like, the whole point of having these discussions is to open up the necessary discourse. But I don't think, okay, to address the contradiction, right? So at the beginning, I said that parents shouldn't have control over it, and I might have slipped up a little bit. My actual point here, parents should not have the final say, but I'm perfectly okay with, when it comes to the family court, who still, whether parents have an influence or not, is the one who decides what's best for the child. If a parent can have some influence in the family court, but I don't think that it should be up to the parent to decide what is best for the child in something like this, when the parent actually has no idea of what is best for that child in this instance. Any other instance, that's fine. But when it comes to things like this, it's really hard for parents to conceptualize what a person who is going through an issue like this, or going through something like being part of or being any part of the LGBT plus community is. The only people who really understand that are other members. And so because of the fact that parents, they don't always are in the best possible position to speak to their child about these things, or to kind of know what the go is with these sorts of situations, I don't think that they should have the final say, based on the fact that, like I said, in this instance, they're not the best possible actor here. That's not to say that the child knows best what is for the child, but I'm pretty sure the child would know better for themselves than what their own parent does in something like this. But even so, it still comes down to the family courts, right? It's not like, any child who decides that they're going through gender dysphoria and wants to get affirmation surgery is going to get it. But even so, like moving on to the whole practicality thing, seeing as you want to keep coming back to it, I would also expect my own kids to pay for that. Particularly if I didn't support it myself. Like I totally, if my kids were, if I didn't support this and my kids wanted to do it and they were happy to pay for it themselves, which is, I'm sure would be an option, then that's totally fine. But if I did support it, then I'd be happy to help them because I know that it's benefiting them in the long run. And I know that it can be pretty harmful if they, if it doesn't go the way that they want. So I'm not saying all parents should pay for it, but I'm certainly saying that kids, especially children who want to go through with this, would probably be more than happy to pay for it if it means that they actually feel comfortable with who they are.
Okay. Well, I actually sort of feel a little bit like weird, when you sort of talk about, courts deciding. It's actually making me feel, like I think most people would actually, it's slightly sick. The idea of, a few men in suits going against my wishes for my child over something like this, I am convinced that 99.9% recurring percent of all parents in the world would fight tooth and claw and probably commit murder to stop some stupid bloody, as I say, grey men in suits, whatever, saying that this can happen without my consent. It's as simple as that. It's abuse, plain and simple. It's like bloody circumcision, all that crap. Come on, there's other things in life to worry about. Other things. Worry about it when you're a bit older. Fine, when you're your own person. When you're below that age, no. Okay?
I really don't see how this is abuse. Like, I understand that, some parents would probably want to go against it, which is fine. But considering that, when it comes to the family courts, they actually can have final say in literally anything. It's actually the law, considering that, the family court or any court actually is one of the only non-biased parties when it comes to pretty much anything. And so they are the best actors to decide what is best for pretty much anyone, not just children, right? But the fact that, you brought up the point that parents would probably be murderers if this was allowed, just goes to show that they aren't actually the best person to decide what is best for their own children. If a parent is going to, even consider murdering someone because their child wants to do something and, just because they don't agree with it, then that probably shows that they're, it's just not good it's not a good environment for the child if their parents willing to murder someone over the fact that the child wants to do something that disagrees with the parents' beliefs, which is why the family court should step in. Like, it's a weird point. And like, I get that, parents would want to disagree with it, but I don't think that in most instances that parents are the best possible people to decide what is best for their child in this instance. And we're also not talking about children who have no idea what's going on. We're talking about like 15 to 18-year-olds who in some cases might not be the most mature people, but generally they have their heads screwed on pretty well. And so if we go back to like the psychological side of this, right, at this point in time, they are starting to, well, they've pretty much already developed the fact that, the critical thinking and hypothesizing nature of their brain so that they can actually think about repercussions of their actions. So it's not like they're just going to think about this and just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to worry about the future. Like, they actually can conceptualize how can this go wrong? How can it work? How can it not work? And so it means that they're actually, probably best suited to do it now while they're still young and still able to think about it, because the longer you leave it, the less likely they are to do it, not because they don't want to, but because the longer they go without actually acting on something like this, the more they kind of just accept whatever's pushed upon them. And if that means that their parent is like, oh, well, you're this and you're that, and then the child has no real opportunity to act on that, then they're just going to go their whole life like prematurely accepting who they think they are, not who they actually are, which generally leads to some pretty bad negative harms later in life. And like, you can say that doesn't happen all you want, but like, it actually does, especially when you actually realize later in life that, you've been something completely different your whole life and you've never done anything about it. And then you finally realize that you've changed. It just sucks so much.
Well, I've got to say, John, really, I'm glad you run out of time, because what? I mean, you said some parents would object. What? Some parents would object. Most parents would object. Most by a huge, massive, big margin would object. Okay, not some, a lot. Okay. Courts are the best people to decide. I've got one word for that. It starts with B and it ends in ox. Okay. All I can really say, with the greatest of respect to you, is, have children, watch them grow up, and then come back and debate this again. See how you feel. I've got, how many minutes have I got left? Got about 4 minutes left, I think. Don't know what else to say, really. I think, I don't really want to, I don't know if I can say anything else, you've got lots to say on this. I haven't. My answers are pretty well no. I'm not gonna. It's like, oh, dear me, I don't know. Please just, I don't know. I think for your own sake, I really think you should, just do some life, do some stuff, experience. That's what's need in life. See things differently. I saw things differently when I was your age, but not about this. Not about this. No, not at all. Sure, there's loads of things to do in Australia. Go surfing. Anyway, it's been good to talk. I think my time's about to run out in a second. I think I've got 12 seconds left on this, and hope you have a good day, because
Funnily enough, I've actually still got like 4 minutes to go, so nice try, but not quite. Like, the only thing I have left to say now is that if you're going to tell me that I should, or anyone should, go live their life and experience and see things differently and just experience different things, I'm pretty sure that kind of like just goes against everything I've heard you say right now. So it's really hard to see things differently if you are being told that you can't see things differently, right? And you can't be any different to who you actually are. Like, that's something I'm struggling to understand how that actually works. Just because, like, I think it's really hard to see something different if, your own parents are telling you, no, you can't see something different because you're this and you can't be anything other than that. Like, okay, I'm not going to get too caught up in language here because like it's causing some problems in terms of like, you know, when I was like, some parents might agree with it, some parents won't, like whatever, like regardless, right? It's just language issues that just, it doesn't necessarily reflect exactly how the world is. But anyway, moving on. So I'm literally just going to use this minute and a half that I have left just to reaffirm that, like, in some cases, in this case particularly, parents are not the best possible person to decide what is best for the child. Like, that's not to say that, you know, any other time they aren't, because most of the time they are. This particular instance, I disagree. The reason being is because it is quite common, will probably be very common, for parents to deny their kid the opportunity to do this based on their own personal bias and their own personal prejudice, which, you know, isn't always a bad thing. But if it's going to, you know, prevent the child from being comfortable with who they are, prevent the child from, you know, being something that they feel like they are, then it is pretty harmful. Like, I can well imagine that any child that feels one way and has their own parents telling them otherwise is probably going to develop some pretty negative feelings about themselves and about their parents too. It's probably going to be pretty dangerous for their relationship. And, you know, sometimes it might not be, sometimes it will be. That's just the luck of the draw. But I seriously do not think that in this instance, parents are the best possible people to decide what is best for that person who is consciously able to make a choice and make a decision about how they feel about themselves and what they want to do about that.
Okay, well, I think like me, you're getting confused over the time because you've actually got 1 minute and 8 seconds left. Trying to get used to this interface because there's 2 times things here. I don't actually like doing these ones. I much prefer to do the, you know, just pitch in whenever. Not least because, you know, when you sort of say loads and loads and loads of things, then you've got to sort of pick up, oh, hang on, what you said this and said that, you know. All I'm hearing is this, you know, like, it's like, God, you know, like this, it's like, sounds like it's a dreadful problem that all these children are growing up dreadfully unhappy because they don't know what sex they're supposed to be. It's like, come on, you know, you know, there may be some people in your country and some in mine, some young people who have these gender identity issues, you know, who, you know, it may pass, I don't know. Some of these issues may stay with them all their life, I don't know. But if you're telling me that you would advocate a change in your country's law so that you are, well, to use, for want of a better word, kind of pandering to a tiny issue that would take away a fundamental right of decision from parents, you know, that's sick, really. Just, well, you know, and daft. And like I say, there are far more important things for any society to be concerned with. I've actually got about 5 minutes left, apparently. You've got 1 minute something left. Can we end this debate early? Because, you know, I just don't know what else to say about this. Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm going to bed now because obviously it's what time is it? It's well, you know, mate, it's like it's nearly midnight here in England. So I'd like to say goodnight, really.
Yeah, I mean, I have not much else to say. I could go on and on, but it's probably not going to go anywhere. So I think I might just end it now to save us both the trouble of, you know, having a really hard ending to this debate. So look forward to the next one.